the real challenge is going to be how fast the international community, after this conference at Sharm el-Sheikh, comes up with a policing force, a security force of troops that can secure Gaza so that the people will be able to reconstruct their lives physically and socially in ways that provide for security both for Gaza and for Israel without Hamas. And then the Israeli army will be able to leave Gaza.
We are reflecting, of course, on the history that has been made today, the release of 20 Israeli hostages back to Israel, back to their families, and the release of nearly 2,000, it's 1,900 around there in total, Palestinian prisoners, many of whom have been held by Israel without charge over the last 2 years. There have been significant scenes, as you can imagine, in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, with those pictures of released hostages, Israeli hostages, beamed throughout the square to wild applause and jubilation. Also in Gaza with the return of Palestinian prisoners, and in Ramallah in the West Bank as well. There were some brilliant scenes earlier of Palestinian prisoners, as I said, many of whom have been held without charge, being put on the necks of people in the crowd, sort of surfed through the crowd on the crowd's shoulders today. I was looking at those earlier. They are historic scenes. It is all hoped that today is a day of significance, and a significance that holds. And that's where we're going to go next, really, as we talk about what is next to come. There's been, of course, a peace plan signed officially today at a peace summit in Egypt. World leaders, including Donald Trump and Keir Starmer, were there to do that. And that effectively brings an end to the war between Israel and Hamas. Here are the parents of hostage Aitan Moore meeting him in hospital.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Well, what will the future for Palestinians look like? Sharon Haskell is the Deputy Foreign Minister for Israel. John Pinar on Drive asked her how the government feels about a Palestinian state.
Gaza was a two-state experiment. We gave that land. We completely disengaged one-sidedly. We evacuated and took out every single living Jew from the Gaza Strip. Even the dead who were buried there, we brought them back to Israel, giving them independency to govern themselves. And it exploded in our face on the 7th of October. If you have an obsession in creating another terrorist state like the one was, I'm sorry, but we're not going to do that experiment again.
Well, Thomas Warrick is a former senior Middle East advisor at the US State Department and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thomas, I wonder whether the words of Sharon Haskell there, Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel, whether those words concern you, because it feels that Israel will never be in a position where they can recognise a self-determined Palestinian state, and that they are still very upset at what they feel led to October the 7th. That is their justification.
Well, and indeed it goes back, Kate, to the Second Intifada, which many Israelis felt was a betrayal of serious efforts by both sides to reach a peace at Camp David in the year 2000. And it is a reality in Israeli politics today that the October 7 attack has probably set back support for a Palestinian state among Israelis by at least 10 years. So this is the political reality that October 7th brought, great destruction both to Israel and to Palestinians. But President Trump is trying to get this deal to work by force of will alone. And obviously, the most important step coming up in the next few days, assuming they can find more of the deceased hostages, is the question of, will Hamas really disarm? Because if that doesn't happen, then that will be a sign Hamas is not prepared to live up to Trump's plan, and that could open up an occasion for Israel to restart the war.
We know that we've had reports of Hamas deploying armed fighters and police across parts of Gaza in an attempt to reassert authority in the territory. There are also militant groups there too. And the assertion by some is that some of those militant groups are actually funded by Israel. I don't know whether you can comment on that or whether you want to stick to the wider issue.
Everyone assumes that's true. Otherwise, how would they have access to guns? And indeed, the Israeli army quite visibly leaves these tribal elements alone. And what Israel, and indeed now the international community, is looking for are non-Hamas Palestinians who have the respect of enough people to govern in Gaza. It's a very troubling sign that Hamas has already taken to executing people that it says opposed its rule. And so this really does suggest a very heavy-handed crackdown is coming in Western Gaza. This could end up leading to the partition of Gaza, with part of it under Hamas's control and part of it under international control. But the perils of this are obviously taking a second place today to the joys, as you said, on both sides, at the freedom for loved ones.
Yeah, it is a complex situation, as you've been pointing out. And of course, this peace plan has now been signed in Egypt. Phase 1 is about to be complete. To finish it off, we need the release of the rest of the dead hostages, sadly dead hostages. We know that 4 have been released today and there are 24 still outstanding. Do you have full faith that they will be returned by Hamas, the remaining dead hostages?
Well, there actually is a practical consideration. The locations of the graves where these people were buried is not entirely clear. The fog of war makes that kind of thing inevitable. Every country has unidentified war dead, and this is obviously very tragic when the families of the hostages expected that they would at least receive the bodies of their loved ones when the war was over. But look, the real challenge is going to be how fast the international community, after this conference at Sharm el-Sheikh, comes up with a policing force, a security force of troops that can secure Gaza so that the people will be able to reconstruct their lives physically and socially in ways that provide for security both for Gaza and for Israel without Hamas. And then the Israeli army will be able to leave Gaza. This depends very much on Tony Blair and the Gaza International Transitional Authority he's trying to put together. We're hoping out of this conference today come commitments of tens of thousands of troops that it will take to keep the peace. And it will take billions of dollars to be pledged by countries all over the world. So the question for today is, will Britain, France, Italy, Canada, other Western countries join with Arab countries and other Muslim countries like Indonesia to provide troops?
It is a drop in the ocean, but Keir Starmer has already announced today £20 million worth of British aid. This is for the immediate to prevent famine, malnutrition and disease in Gaza. And Keir Starmer will host an international summit bringing together businesses, financiers and governments when we talk about long-term investment in Gaza. What is the long-term future of the Israeli Prime Minister? Attention can now turn, can't it, to the failure of the country's fabled intelligence and defence apparatus failing so catastrophically on October the 7th. All of that has been deferred thus far.
Well, and it will probably continue to be deferred until, as Netanyahu has put it, Hamas is fully defeated, which is not yet. There are several reasons why there's going to be an Israeli election no later than November of 2026. It could be much earlier. Israel has internal divisions over its budget, and if there's no budget, you have to have a new election. That could be as soon as March. But Netanyahu clearly wants to be able to go to the Israeli public and say, I defeated Hamas, I defeated Hezbollah, I defeated Iran. In essence, put me back in office. No one knows at this point what the Israeli public will think about that argument.
I mean, he may have to go back to the Israeli government, the people of Israel, and say, look, I got the hostages back. Yes. It's just so hard to say, isn't it? I mean, a note today, Donald Trump, many will say sticking his oar in, many will say fair enough, he gave it a go. He asked the Israeli president, didn't he,
Yes.
Herzog, for a pardon for
Yes.
Netanyahu.
And Israelis have tended to ignore those kinds of statements from President Trump in the past. He said them in the past and people have shrugged them off.
What do you think is the future of the Israeli Prime Minister? Where do you fall on this?
Well, one thing that everyone should take note of is all the indications are, if there is a new election, that the right-wing members that have really had an oversized effect on both the Gaza war and the situation in the West Bank, at least one and perhaps both of them may not return to office. And that would create, even if Netanyahu stays as prime minister, it would be a coalition that looks very different from the one governing Israel today. I don't think they would accept a Palestinian state yet. That's not something the Israeli public of all parties is prepared to accept. But it would have a totally different dynamic, both for how Jerusalem deals with Ramallah, but also how it deals with Gaza and indeed the larger Arab world. And so that actually is something that is almost universally regarded among the pollsters as a likely outcome. Whether Netanyahu stays on as prime minister is seen as a toss-up. But without the hardline members of his cabinet, it will be a very different Israeli government, even if Netanyahu still is the prime minister.
Look, really good to speak to you, Thomas. Thank you very much. Thomas Warrick, former senior Middle East advisor at the US State Department and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, there with us. Great to hear from you.